Before we go any further, let me be straight with you. What you're about to hear isn't magic, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. This video is for educational and informational purposes only, rooted in historical research, traditional craftsmanship, and practical observation. Results will vary depending on your leather type, your climate, the age of your boots, and how you apply what you learn here. Some techniques may not be suitable for all leather finishes or materials. Always test on a small, hidden area first. And if you're dealing with expensive or heirloom quality leather goods, consulting a professional cobbler is always a smart move. This isn't a guaranteed fix. It isn't a miracle. But for a lot of people, it's been quietly working for generations, while the rest of the world moved on and forgot about it. Somewhere in an old farmhouse in rural Montana, there's a pair of leather boots sitting in a closet. They were bought in 1971. They still get worn. Not because the man who owns them has some secret trust fund for premium footwear. Not because he replaces them every few years. But because he learned something from his father, a $2 trick using an ingredient so simple, most people walk right past it in the grocery store without a second thought. Meanwhile, the average American spends over $300 a year replacing worn-out shoes and boots that should have lasted a decade. The leather cracks, the stitching pulls, the sole separates. And most people assume that's just the way it goes. But what if it isn't? There's a word that cobblers used to say: feed the leather. Not clean it, not condition it, feed it, like it was something alive. And in a way they weren't wrong. Leather is an organic material. It breathes, it absorbs. It loses moisture over time, especially in dry climates, winter cold, or intense heat. And when it dries out, really dries out, the fibers at a microscopic level begin to crack and separate. What starts as a surface scuff becomes a structural failure. The boot that could have lasted 30 years starts falling apart in 3. Here's where it gets interesting. For most of human history, people didn't have commercial shoe sprays or synthetic leather conditioners. They had what was around them, and what they reached for, across dozens of different cultures, spanning hundreds of years, it was something that came from an animal: beef tallow, rendered animal fat, the same basic substance used to waterproof sails, condition saddle leather, grease wagon axles, and protect the boots of soldiers marching through the mud of Gettysburg. The use of animal fats to preserve leather goes back further than most people realize. Ancient Romans are documented to have used animal grease and plant oils to maintain their leather armor and sandals. The Roman legions covered thousands of miles on foot. The health of their footwear was, quite literally, a matter of survival. Moving forward through history, European cobblers in the medieval period used what they called dubbin, a blend of tallow, beeswax, and fish oil, to treat leather goods. The exact recipe varied by region, but the foundational ingredient was almost always rendered animal fat. It was cheap, it was effective, and it was everywhere. By the 1800s, American frontier life had brought this tradition across the Atlantic in full force. Cowboys, homesteaders, and military personnel all relied on tallow-based treatments to keep their leather gear functional through brutal seasons. And the remarkable thing? The basic chemistry behind why it worked then is the same reason it still works today. Think of leather at the microscopic level, like a sponge made of interlocking fibers. When that sponge is saturated with natural oils and moisture, it's supple. It bends without breaking, it resists water. Now leave that sponge in a dry room for a few months, or expose it to repeated freezing and thawing, or leave it in the back seat of your truck through a Texas summer. The moisture evaporates, the natural oils migrate out, and the fibers, without lubrication, begin to grind against each other. That friction creates tiny fractures. Those tiny fractures become the cracks you can see with your naked eye. Beef tallow is composed primarily of saturated fats, stearic acid and oleic acid. These fatty acid molecules are small enough to penetrate into the fiber structure of leather, but stable enough to stay there without rapidly breaking down. When applied, tallow works its way into the fiber matrix, essentially replacing the natural oils that time and wear have stripped away. The leather becomes supple again, the fibers can flex without fracturing. And because tallow contains naturally occurring water-repellent properties, the surface becomes better at shedding moisture too. So why don't we hear about this anymore? Over time, this method became less mainstream as commercial leather care products flooded the market. The 20th century brought industrialized shoe care, silicone sprays, synthetic conditioners, petroleum-based polishes. These products are convenient, they're standardized, they come in a nice tin with a logo on it, and many of them work reasonably well, but they also come with trade-offs. Some synthetic conditioners can alter the color of certain leathers. Some silicone-based sprays create a surface coating that temporarily repels water, but can actually inhibit the leather's ability to breathe over time. And they're not cheap, not when you're maintaining multiple pairs of boots, a leather belt, a saddle, a work jacket. Beef tallow, by contrast, can be found at most grocery stores, at farmers markets, and online, often for less than $2. Some butchers will practically give it away. That's the part that surprises people most. All right, Before we get into the step-by-step process, I want to hear from you. Do you already take care of your leather boots, or have you been tossing them when they crack and buying new ones? Drop a comment below. Tell me what state you're in and what kind of leather gear you're working with. Are you dealing with dry desert conditions out west, humid summers in the south, hard winters in the Midwest? Because your environment actually changes how often you'll want to apply something like this, and I want to talk about that in future videos. If this kind of practical, forgotten knowledge is what you come here for, hit subscribe and tap the bell. We cover this kind of thing every single week. Now, let's get into it. Never apply any conditioner to dirty leather. Dirt and grit act like sandpaper against the fiber structure. Use a damp cloth or a mild leather cleaner to gently wipe down the boot. Get into the seams and the welt, that strip where the upper meets the sole. Let it dry fully before moving on. Don't rush this step. Once the boot is clean and dry, look at it in good light. Are there surface areas that look visibly dull or ashy? Any spots where cracking has already begun? These are the places that need the most attention. If the cracks are deep, all the way through the surface layer, tallow won't repair structural damage. It helps prevent further cracking, but it's not a filler. Manage expectations going in. Now here's the trick most people skip. Tallow at room temperature is firm, almost waxy. If you apply it cold, it tends to sit on the surface rather than penetrate. Warm it gently by placing the jar in a bowl of hot water for a few minutes, or hold a small piece between your palms for 30 seconds. You want it soft and spreadable, not melted to liquid. Then, using a soft cloth or the tips of your fingers, work a small amount into the leather using circular motions. You don't need a thick layer, a little goes a long way. Start with less than you think you need. Let the leather absorb it. Focus on high flex areas, the toe box, the ankle crease, the area behind the heel. These are where cracking typically begins. Give the boots at least 30 minutes, ideally a few hours, for the tallow to fully absorb. Don't force dry them with heat. Room temperature is ideal. Some people prefer to let boots sit overnight. Once absorbed, take a clean dry cloth and buff the surface in long strokes. This removes any excess and raises a light, natural sheen. For added protection before wet conditions, a thin layer of pure beeswax applied over the tallow creates a surface barrier that sheds water well, essentially a modern version of that old dubbin recipe. In dry climates or winter conditions, plan to reapply every 4 to 6 weeks of regular use. In moderate climates with occasional wear, every 2 to 3 months. And always treat your boots before and after long-term storage. Here's something important to say plainly. Beef tallow is not a cure. It's not going to restore a boot that's already structurally failed. It's not the right choice for suede or nubuck leather. Those materials require different care entirely. It can darken certain light-colored leathers, which is why testing on a hidden area first is essential. Modern conditioners like lanolin-based or neat's foot oil-based products are also effective and well-researched. Some professional cobblers prefer them. The goal isn't to say one method is universally superior. The goal is to understand your options. And if your boots are particularly valuable, vintage, heirloom, or expensive, talking to a professional cobbler before experimenting at home is genuinely good advice. There's something quietly satisfying about a pair of boots that outlast fashion trends, recessions, and planned obsolescence. The grandfather who wore his boots for 40 years wasn't special. He didn't have access to better products. He just knew that leather, real, honest leather, responds to care. Not complicated care, not expensive care. Just consistent, sensible attention using the kind of things that have always worked. That knowledge didn't disappear, it just got quiet for a while, and that's exactly why we're here. Before you go, everything shared in this video is for educational and informational purposes only. We don't make promises about specific results, and we encourage you to do your own research, test carefully on your materials, and consult professionals when it makes sense. If this video gave you something useful, a method, a perspective, or just a reason to look at that old pair of boots differently, share it with someone who'd appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned, because next time we're looking at another forgotten material that generations of tradespeople used to protect tools, wood, and metal. It's sitting in most hardware stores right now, hiding in plain sight. See you in the next one.